Hello friends, my name is Marines, and today I'll be telling you about my most recent reads. A lot of my most recent reads. This year I started making wrap-up videos by bunches of books instead of by month, and that was working out really well for me, but I took a break from video making, which means that I've fallen behind on talking to you guys about my most recent reads. I decided to do the next bunch all together just so that I can move on from there. Typically, I've been talking to you guys about the books that I read in chronological order, but I've grouped them up a little bit differently here, so this is just a heads up that I'm going to talk to you about the books not necessarily in the order that I read them. First up are the books that I read for the Read Your E-Reader Readathon. I made a separate video about this so you guys can check it out if you want to hear my thoughts on these books specifically, but I'm just going to kind of run through them now. First up is Pride and Prejudice, a classic you've probably heard of. It is one of my favorite books of all time, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars on this reread as well. Next is The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes, a short novel about a man looking back on his life and specific memories, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Next is The Raven Boys by Maggie, Stiefvater, a YA fantasy novel about psychics and a treasure hunt that I ended up giving 3.5 out of 5 stars. And lastly, The Girl in 6E by A.R. Torre, an erotic thriller about a girl who locks herself up so she won't murder people, which I gave 3 out of 5 stars. Next up, I have books that I finished for my buddy reading group. Pride and Prejudice also counts here because I read this with my buddy reading group, but by now you guys get it. Favorite book is a favorite for a reason. February's book was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This is a fantasy novel about 2 rival magicians that use a circus of their own creation as a venue for a competition between them. The story jumps around in time and is told from multiple points of view, including the 2 magicians, other people involved in the creation of the circus, a young boy whose fate gets caught up in the destiny of the circus, and a clockmaker turned superfan of the circus. I originally read this in November of 2011 and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. At that point, my feelings were mostly positive, but my main hangup was that I felt that the climax and resolution weren't big enough for what the story had created, and that I felt rather disconnected from the characters. I wanted to reread this book mainly for the setting. It was my favorite part of the story the first time I read it, and it was what stood out in my mind so vividly in the years since I read it. So I reread it mostly for the setting, and what I found was that the characters and the story stood out so much more to me during this reread, as I understood that the setting itself was more of a character, and it was also a venue for us to better understand who the characters were, because they are creating the circus, and I felt disconnected from them, but this time around, in understanding the circus and understanding that they were the creators of the circus, I felt like I understood the characters better as well. Now, I think that my initial impressions and complaints were still true in a sense. Rereading it with the full story in mind really helped me pick apart details and understand the entire thing much better, but it shouldn't take a reread for you to experience that. Now, it might have been a me thing where I was reading and what I was feeling when I originally read this, but I think honestly that in creating such a big setting and so little character progression throughout the story, it does kind of give you this sense of being detached from the main characters. Also, the entire feeling of this story is very dreamlike and misty, which is a credit to the author, but again, it adds that layer of separation between you and what you're reading. Morgenstern is fantastic about describing things. She invokes all of the senses, but this is a story that is very description heavy, so if that's not a thing that you enjoy, you might struggle with that here in this book. While we were buddy reading this, a few people mentioned that it was slower paced for them, and I think that's linked back to the fact that it is description heavy. My favorite comment this time around came from Emily, whose channel I will also link, but the circus draws some really hardcore fans, and she likened it to a nod to fandom and the community that can kind of build around things, in this case a circus, sometimes books, but just the general idea of fandom and how those people come together to create things based on something else, but also how those people come together and form a kind of family. And I love that interpretation of that. It just warmed my heart, especially as you see the different characters that are introduced as kind of part of this fandom. This time around, I definitely bumped up my rating. I would say it's 4.5 out of 5 stars. March's read was The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making by Catherynne and Valente. I also went on to read book 2, which is The Girl Who Fell Beneath Fairyland and Led the Revels There. I'm not going to review these just yet because I am making my way through the entire series so that I can finish off the series with the final book that came out in March. One of the first things I ever said on this channel was that I wanted to to review this series, and now I finally can, but I am making my way slowly through these and really taking my time with them and highlighting the things that I love about her style and her writing, so that should be coming soon. I love this book. I loved it the third time around, and I'm very excited that the people who read with me really seem to enjoy it as well. Next up, I have another group of books that I'm going to show you to tell you that I'm not going to talk about them because, again, I want to do full series reviews on these things once I finish up with them or in separate videos. First, I have Sweet Tooth, volumes 1 through 3 by Jeff Lemire. This is a graphic novel series set in a post-apocalyptic world where sickness has wiped out most of the population and all of the children born are now animal-human hybrids. These hybrids are the only ones who are immune to the sickness, and our main character, Gus, is one of these hybrids, and we follow him after his father tells him never to leave the forest where he was born, the place where he's always lived, and shortly after the first volume starts, he indeed does leave that place, and trouble almost instantly finds him. My feelings are so invested in the series right now. I think after that point, actually after 3, I've been reading 4 and I'm more than halfway done with it, but I have to read it little by little because I am just like so stressed out and on the edge of my seat right now with the series because I just feel like something bad is going to happen, if not soon, by the end. So like I said, my feelings are very invested. I'm loving this. This is one of my favorite graphic novel series so far that I have ever read. I can't wait to talk to you about it because it's doing some very interesting things with its characters and art. So stay tuned. Next, I have Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay and the Story of a Lost Child, books 3 and 4 in the Neapolitan novels by Elena Ferrante. I did it. I finished the quartet, and I am just in awe of what Ferrante has created here with these novels. It took me a little bit longer to get into both of these in both cases, but it usually hit around the 50 to 100 page mark, and I was just in it, and I would finish the rest of them pretty quickly. In the case of book 4, it was in one sitting that I just finished. I did a whole video giving you 5 reasons why you should read the first in the series, My Brilliant Friend. And as I said, I will end this entire experience by doing a full review on the series and a spoilery discussion because I want to talk to you about characters, about arcs, about themes. It's just so much here to talk about, and I can't wait to do that. Specifically because it's very difficult to talk about each book in and of itself, because this really feels like one single story that was broken up into 4 parts, where sometimes series feel like you're reading about the same characters or maybe the same setting, but very different stories at different points. This is like one giant story that is broken up in a very logical way, and you see why and how it's done, but at the same time it just flows together so nicely that I don't know how to talk about book 3 without mentioning 1, 2, and 4, and etc. I can already tell you that I'm planning to reread My Brilliant Friend probably in November or December towards the end of this year. So if this is something that you've said I want to eventually read, you can wait for me to do it towards the end of the year and we can talk about it together in the buddy reading group. Apart from all of that, I have 2 more books to talk to you about. First up is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafon. You guys, I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. What a brilliant and beautifully written book. I found it absolutely enchanting and immersive. I just enjoyed the story so much, even for what others might consider its fault, and that is its kind of like ambling and easy pace. It seems to be kind of going all over the place with pieces of a mystery, but also the young boy, the main character's life, and the people who are around him. So there is that kind of feeling that it's a little bit slower, especially through the middle, but I love that pace of it, especially matched up with the atmosphere that the writer creates here. It's very gothic and mysterious, and in that way I felt that the pace matched the atmosphere perfectly. This story at its heart is about the son of a bookstore owner named Daniel, who is let in on a family secret and discovers a book by Julian Carax, and he's immediately taken by this book, and in trying to find out more about Julian and about this book, he finds that someone is systematically destroying all of Carax's works. As he stumbles upon this bigger mystery, he investigates things, but it's also about growing up. It's about a post-Civil War Barcelona, about the kind of scars that wars leave, about family, the family that we get and the family that we choose, about love, about secrets, and so much about books and their power. I just noticed that I've been holding this upside down the whole time, but I'm not going to refilm that, so it is what it is. I will definitely revisit this book in the future. If you like magical realism, I would recommend this story for you. If you like things that are very immersive, description heavy, atmosphere heavy, I would recommend this for you as well. If you're trying to read more translated fiction, which I know is a goal for a lot of people this year, I would recommend this as well because it was originally written in Spanish. I also listened to parts of this on audiobook, and I can recommend that, especially for knowing how to pronounce certain things. So the audiobook was fantastic. I would recommend that part of it as well. I think I already said this, but 5 out of 5 stars. Lastly, I finished reading New Moon, the second book in the Twilight Saga, which I am reading and recapping for Snark Squad. I'm reading all of these books for the first time as an adult, and specifically to pick them apart and be critical of them. So most of my knowledge to Twilight before reading came from pop culture, and I had seen the movies and that stuff, but I don't think anything had prepared me. I had read criticisms of it before, you know, there was a while where, you know, making fun of Twilight was kind of a thing to do, but I don't think anything prepared me for how racist and upsetting and just strange this second book was. It's full of microaggressions against Native Americans and the roles that they play within the story and how they are described by Bella time and time again, how the other characters see them. It's a problem if the only minority characters within your story turn into literal animals, and I cannot believe that she just did not see that. The author didn't see that, and nobody was like, hey girl, maybe this is something that you should not do. That's the beginning of Meyer's problems with characterization, and boy, does it go on from there. Because apart from that, this book is essentially about overlooking Bella's mental health and mental illness and whatever is going on in her head, because after Edward leaves her in the second book, she basically becomes suicidal, depressed, and she starts trying to put herself in situations where she is inducing auditory hallucinations in order to see Edward's face and hear his voice. She cannot live without this boy, and the only time that she does anything in the story is after she finds another boy to kind of fill his place. Stephenie Meyer has defended Bella and said that she's not a damsel in distress, that she's just, you know, getting over true love, and that's an even worse message to me, as if you don't become suicidal, if you don't want to kill yourself, it wasn't true love for you. Bella's mental health is completely brushed aside by the time that Edward gets back into the picture, and Edward himself was trying to kill himself as well, which is kind of just, you know, accepted as, you know, true love. And Edward as like this main male character, this main male love interest, there's a scene towards the end where he's trying to think of how he's going to get himself killed, and he thinks very casually about just killing a bunch of innocent humans, and then, I don't know, he's, you know, just casually thinking about murder. But the best thing is not that he wants to murder people, but that Stephenie decides to go past murder and like his other plans to make a scene or attack a guard or things like that, and decides that the climax of this book should be Edward stepping into the sun to sparkle. The rest of the book just goes downhill from there in terms of things that make sense, because it does not. Everything is convenient and tied up nicely just because the girl and the guy come back together, and we can just forget the pain that we've been in for hundreds and hundreds of pages, except for not, because I will never forget that pain. Ever. This brings me up to date with my reading until last week, but I already finished 3 books this past week, so I will have another video hopefully soon so that I don't get too far behind again on keeping you guys updated with my reading. If you've read any of the books that I've mentioned, let's chat about them down in the comments as always. I know this was a bit of a longer video, but I wanted to do it this way so I didn't have this kind of in the back of my mind that I had to catch up and have that pressure. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys soon. I know, I'll make them step into the sun and sparkle.